Marketing can influence most of the pipeline, show an exceptional return, and still leave the executive meeting with one uncomfortable question. Did marketing create the opportunity, or did marketing simply touch it? Now, that doesn't automatically mean the numbers are wrong. It means the story is not yet helping leadership decide what to fund, where to intervene, or whether the engine is really producing results and outcomes according to the plan. Now, attribution tells you who touched the journey. Predictability tells leadership whether the engine can actually hit the plan and what to do next. Welcome to RevAI Real Talk, a B2B go-to-market conversation series for leaders who want less hype, clear decisions, and measurable revenue movement. I'm Nikke Rose. I'll be your host. RevAI Real Talk is sponsored by RevBuilders AI. We help B2B go-to-market teams build, launch, and scale revenue programs where people, AI agents, signals, workflows, and metrics all work together as one trusted revenue engine. This is one of our go-to-market field notes episodes. That means no polished case study recital and no generic guest interviews. It is two operators comparing what we've seen in the field, what the numbers did or did not tell us, and what leaders should do next. All right, so today we're tackling a problem almost every marketing leader has felt. You can show influence, pipeline, and return, and still fail the executive trust test. Joining me today as co-host is Annika Helmrich. Hey, Annika.
Hey, Nikke. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here, Annika. A quick intro. Annika is a seasoned enterprise SaaS marketing executive and go-to-market operator. She spent more than 20 years building growth engines across complex global businesses, including Amber Road, E2Open, and Jagger, where Annika and I worked together to scale the company's ABM strategy, doubling performance and outcomes without adding headcount. And why it's so great to have Annika on today. Annika's built account-based and cross-functional growth programs across multiple products and business units. She's connected marketing investment to pipeline, wins, expansion, and revenue protection. And she knows what it means to work backwards from a bookings target and make the real revenue gap visible to executives. Now, that combination of strategy, numbers, and operating reality is exactly what this conversation needs.
Thank you, Nikke. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. We lived and breathed it as a team over at Jagger, and we're still seeing a lot of the challenges we're talking about today, and we're happy to dive in and talk about how we can solve some of these challenges and how marketers are facing the executive trust paradox as we talk about. So let's get into it.
Absolutely. Let's get into it. All right, so let me dive in. I've got a first question for you. In the environments that you've operated in, why executive trust in the marketing revenue story kept showing up as a reoccurring issue for you?
I think the number one reason is everyone has not different definitions of what success looks like. So the definitions of our pipeline metrics, our revenue outcomes, our conversion rates, everything was, marketing had one definition of success, sales had another, our partner team another. So we're all working in different silos when it comes to how we're measuring our success. I think that is very common in enterprise SaaS.
I think, having different agendas across the go-to-market team really creates, on the one hand, many legitimate contributions, but on the other hand, I still think leadership is lacking and really needs one coherent picture that it can use to make decisions. All right, so good point. I have another question. Let's start with an uncomfortable scenario. So a marketing team can show strong influence and exceptional pipeline return, but leadership still asks, did marketing create the opportunity or simply touch it? What do you think? What is that question really telling us?
Yeah, I mean, I think it tells me that the numbers might be accurate, but the numbers that marketing is putting out there is answering a narrower question than the executive leadership wants to hear when they're asking a larger question. At Jagger, we could show that marketing influenced nearly 2/3 of the ACV, the revenue, and delivered 25x in pipeline So the return was very high as far as our influence of the pipeline. So we look at marketing influence, but influence alone, it just doesn't tell the executive team whether we were creating enough qualified pipeline and accelerating the right opportunities or
Mm.
reducing the risk of the plan they had put in place. Were we doing enough and were we following along the same path with the rest of the go-to-market team as one? And I think that's a challenge that we were up against. So while influence is definitely useful evidence to show that we're putting our budget in the right places, it just isn't the entire revenue story.
And so the distinction that I hear is this: the numbers may be valid, but they're answering a narrower question than the executive team's asking, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So influence can show that marketing was present and may have helped shape the journey, but influence alone isn't telling leadership whether to invest more, where the engine's stuck, or what's likely to happen next. Good
yeah,
points.
absolutely.
Next question: what do you think about this? Attribution can be technically correct, but it can still fail to help leadership make a business decision. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think it can, a report, a dashboard can show where marketing is touching the account and the opportunities, but still fails to help the C level know where to invest, where to intervene, and what's going to happen next. So that predictability is lacking. So before a dashboard becomes trusted, I think marketing, sales, RevOps, and finance as well need a shared definition for contribution to pipeline, how definitions for the stages, pipeline stages, definitions for the conversion progression of that pipeline, and revenue outcomes as well. Ultimately, more attribution detail does not fix a definition problem. So we are struggling again with always not having one revenue team focus on the exact same defined metrics. And that's where it always comes down to is the problem.
Exactly. So influence is evidence, but it is definitely not the whole revenue story. I think more attribution detail doesn't fix the definition problem. Speaking of attribution, this is why I prefer contribution language over one binary sourced or not sourced label. Marketing may help create demand, progress an account, accelerate a deal, support expansion, or protect revenue, but the executive story should be able to show those different jobs without pretending one field explains the whole journey. For me, the problem is not that marketing lacks numbers. The problem is that the company has not agreed on what those numbers mean. All right, now let's take that into a complex enterprise journey. In a motion with multiple business units, products, campaigns, and buying group members, what breaks when we force the journey into a first touch or last touch source field?
I struggle with this all the time. I'm a big believer in multi-touch attribution, but again, it's not the only thing. You have to look at everything, right? With a large and long buying sales cycles and large buying committees. So first and last can be considered, but they're not everything. So when you look at these long buying cycles and big buying groups, you're going to have to consider
Yeah.
all of those touch points. At each open, we had 9 business units and we built more than 100 account journeys for all of those strategic accounts. And an account could engage with several products, could engage with many of our campaigns and buying group members from that account. And then multiple teams across the company, across the business units could be engaging with that account before an opportunity existed and after the opportunity existed. So, how do you measure all of that? So, assigning that journey to one source
Yeah.
definitely creates false precision because multiple teams had legitimately contributed to this opportunity being created and also accelerated and closed one. Well, I think first source, lead source, opportunity source, and last source to me is just creating a false narrative. And you really need to just take into account everything, that full buyer's journey, because it could be a 2-year journey. So, what are all those things that contributed to that opportunity being created? So, yeah, I think source could be operationally useful, but it should not become the single executive source of truth for that account or for that opportunity.
I think you said it right. When several teams legitimately contribute, I think a single source field can
Yeah.
create false precision, right? It produces a
Mhm.
neat answer, but not necessarily a truthful one. All right, so I want to add one more important caveat. Now, source reporting is not useless. That's not what we're saying. It can still help teams manage campaigns, channels, and handoffs. So, Annika, where should a team keep source reporting? And where do you think it should stop asking source to carry the entire executive story?
Well, I think source reporting is helpful for marketing leaders to look at when and where they should be placing their investments for net new acquisition. So when contacts are coming into the database, understanding that account might have, or that opportunity might have been created by a paid search or a content syndication. That's helpful to understand that it came into the system that way. So maybe we should be considering investments in that channel, but again, that's just for the marketing leaders to understand. I wouldn't tell the executives that we should be putting all of our marketing funds into paid search because someone came into the database that way. There's so many more touch points, again, in this long buyer's journey. Things that we did at Jagger, Nikke, you spearheaded go to market pods, and we had these cross functional pods. And I think that was excellent because it became an opportunity for everyone to get together across the teams that were aligned on the same territories, the same accounts, the same industries, that were assigned to the same sales leaders. And we had the same growth goals. And in those go-to-market meetings, all of those team members would come together, look at the same accounts, understand where those accounts are progressing, how much pipeline coverage is needed, velocity, and really look at all of that together as one team. And so that's where you can look at source and the more specific granular detail of those dashboards to better understand where you should be focusing your efforts. But that also, I would say, is another opportunity where other data comes into play, like intent data, where those accounts are in their buyer's journey before they become an opportunity. So there's so much more to leverage in those sort of smaller, we call them go-to-market pods, where everybody was
Yep.
coming together and looking at that same set of accounts and same set of data. And that reduced the need for each functions to defend its own credit because the teams that share responsibility, they were all in it together to help move those accounts forward. I think that's really big because with source, it has always becomes kind of a fight or a battle over who gets the credit. And that's really not what we should be focused on, right? We should be focused on
Yep.
how do we move those accounts forward. So let's forget about debating about that and just focus on getting a better operating model and system in place to drive things forward.
100%. It was the one day of the week that I looked forward to the most. So instead of operating in silos or competing for credit, it was the day of the week we all were on the playing field together. Well, it puts us on the playing field for the following week, right? So we had Pipe Gen Friday motions. And so Friday we'd regroup and we'd look at surging accounts and discuss. It was really bi-directional. I learned so much about priority accounts and got more context, which we paid forward into the marketing. And then we set the agenda for the next week. So it was wonderful when these go to market pods aligning marketing, SDRs, and sales into a whole cross functional go to market team really makes a difference. In your mind, what would you say changed when we started doing that?
It's a good question. Everyone, I think, comes back again to not thinking about your own department and your own goals about getting credit for that opportunity, but more so that, we were one team working together, sharing those goals, working as a team that we should, from the very beginning, it should always be in that way to make sure that we're all driving towards the same success metrics. And ultimately, we're just better working relationship. I think there's tighter coordination and more communication with the team members. It feels a little bit more like we're a team that's working again towards the same goals, but also, appreciate each other and collaborate more. It's not like throwing things over the fence. We're actually coordinating plays and making sure that our handoffs and the follow-ups are much more efficient and everyone's clear about their goals and what they need to do.
Agree. Clarity, efficiency, and I'd throw in quality in there. I think
Yeah.
from what I remember, is we were creating quality pipeline and quality revenue. So we're focused on accounts that truly want to buy, they're in market, and help with the deal velocity. I think to the quality pipeline, we also saw more pipeline. I think we had a 30% increase in pipeline once we started forgetting the pipeline source debates and looked at
Yeah.
it together as a holistic operating model.
Yeah.
Everyone's on the field, everyone's playing on the same team. So I would say clarity, efficiency, and quality, which brings us to the efficiency point. When leadership asks marketing to prove efficiency, what do you think they're actually trying to understand? And what makes an efficiency story credible?
Yeah, good question. Definitely at Jagger, we explored driving more efficiencies through additional services, additional automation. But to answer, why leaders ask marketing to prove efficiency, I know that they want to understand how the marketing resources can convert into commercial outcomes. I know we had a very lean team and we ran ABM for North America. We were able to generate significant amount of pipeline in the multi-millions, and it was at a 25x return on marketing investment. We had good pipeline. We had a significant number of wins, and that really allowed us to show the marketing investment that we paid off very quickly. And then the executive conversation went beyond just campaign volume and activity. And we were showing how much marketing dollars translated into pipeline, and how much we were driving conversion and then ultimately revenue. So I think that that was a good example of also bringing that to the executive team early, though, as well into the investment we were making, because we were able to show very quickly that we could scale what we were doing at a very low cost and more efficiently or effectively without hiring more headcount. So I think we were able to increase the number of campaigns by 2x without increasing our core internal team. And so we did that by adding on a partner for additional services that we needed. And ultimately, we found out that efficiency is not simply doing more with less. It's really about also putting those resources against the work that creates the right movement in those accounts and the pipeline. So we were just being smarter, working smarter.
Right. It's very compelling when you can say last year, the cost of our efforts of these programs was X, and the cost, meaning headcount, partner, if you are outsourcing
Yeah.
using an agency for execution work, and the systems, the platforms, the AI platforms, all the tools, and the ad spend, of course. And when you add all of that up as a program spend and then calculate how many deals won that are needed, it quickly becomes a compelling return on investment story, return on marketing investment. In the following year, we went and reduced the amount of deals needed because we were scaling the foundation that we had built in our programs.
Yeah.
So, and we were getting better together as a go-to-market team. Everyone started to understand the dance, understand how to play well together on the field.
Yeah.
We were turning knobs and tweaking, getting the signals tighter and analyzing keywords. So I think the better together aspect really paid it forward, and the return on marketing investment. And once you have a system, a go-to-market operating model that's repeatable and scalable, that is a compelling story. So it's not just how much pipeline we generated and how many wins we got, but the return on the marketing investment overall.
I definitely agree. And I would just throw in the beginning of that investment we were making to get the buy-in from the executive team. Within the first 2 months, we showed that we had already saved $80,000 because we were doing work with our external partner that was a fraction of how much we would be spending if we had hired in-house staff. So just showing how much we were able to scale at a fraction of the cost was allowed us to really continue to expand that partnership with this vendor we were using. And it became an embedded part of our team. And we were, again, able to produce higher volume, but also more impactful and more higher quality of work, while the internal team stayed in-house to align with our cross-functional go-to-market teams and strategize and work on the messaging. That was really important.
Very important point. So that brings me to the next question. And I know that we, in addition to leveraging the external team, we leveraged AI. So we are able to prioritize and put a magnifying glass on what stages accounts were in, who is in the buying committees, and what signals they're giving, right? What was in the dark funnel or what was on site and in our CRM. But this all brings me to my next question with outsourcing. How did you decide what the internal team should own and what a partner could scale and what automation or AI agents could help accelerate?
Yeah, it actually, our partner who we were working with, one of their consultants, they were leveraging this model that I just really loved, its own outsource automate model. It's an operating model. And I just sort of applied that to what we were doing at Jagger when it came to our internal staff, our partners, and how we can automate some of the repeatable tasks. So the internal team owned our strategy, our customer insight, our target counts and prioritization, segmentation, all of that, messaging and alignment with product marketing team and the sales enablement playbooks and battle cards and all that stuff. That was something we kept internally, but we shared with our partners. And then, of course, aligning with the sales leadership was also an internal function. And then working with the executive team and reporting back to the executive and making sure that everything was showing up on the right dashboards. We would work with the operations team at our partner, but we had to make sure that what they were creating for us was part of the full story that we were sharing and presenting to the executive team and the board. And it all aligns with our North Star and everything we were focused on. So that was the internal team. And then the partner agency that we worked with helped us to scale sort of that specialized execution and production for ABM because they had teams that focused on this day in and day out. And they were a specialist when it came to managing the multi-channel orchestration of ABM and leveraging the various ABM and platforms and intent data and understanding how to manage the display ads or paid social, all of that. And they were just experts at what they did. So they were able to help us scale. And then automation was built into what they were doing, and we started to apply more of AI internally to help us with handling the repeatable work and tasks, work that would help to increase the speed and just overall drive consistency across the team. So we're starting to do that a little bit more. We've employed an AI SDR email agent to help us increase the number of opens and response rates and the meeting rate when it came to our SDR function. That really helped. And then building out their intelligent workflows as well to just build out more of these multi-channel campaigns at scale. So there's a lot of things that we were doing with AI, but it's also started, of course, with leveraging predictive AI to identify those intent signals to understand which targets to go after, which target accounts that are in market for our solutions. So that's something that, marketing has been already using from the early days of ABM. The most efficient team is not automatically the smallest. It's about leveraging your people internally, your partners, your technology to make sure that you get the highest value work and outcomes. So I think
Well
that's
said.
critical. Mhm.
I was thinking it's not about the most efficient team being the smallest one, but
Yeah,
it's actually the one where you can symbiotically combine the people, the partners, the agents, and the budget into the right movement, and that's what counts. I
absolutely.
think that was a big learning. So, what efficiency metric would you refuse to celebrate without matching quality or revenue measure?
I think volume of leads is something that I would not care to celebrate, especially looking at those marketing qualified leads because we know we all know that those are not indicators that an account is looking to buy unless you see a massive number of MQLs in the buying group interested in your products, your solutions. That's when you start paying attention. But one person downloading a white paper is something you can convert to an opportunity. So that MQL number or that net new lead number to me is something that I wouldn't bring to the board or to the executive team. It's something that marketing can track to make sure that we have enough inbounds and we're converting those leads to SALs, SQLs, but we're not, we're not giving it too much weight. Like we really should just take it for what it is, but it's not the big picture. And also same thing with the number of the volume of campaigns is not that important. It's you're really looking at the quality of the campaigns and quality of those accounts that you're progressing through their account their buyer's journey and the opportunity stages. And so the velocity of those accounts and ultimately how much revenue we're driving. And more activity is not efficient if it creates low quality pipeline. It's just going to drive maybe a lot of opportunities that go no decision and are a big waste of time for the sales teams.
We were talking about how you roughly made 2.4 times pipeline coverage visible against a target closer to 4 times. Walk us through that moment, and then how did you work backwards from bookings instead of forward from campaigns?
Yeah, I think it was pretty evident that we had a serious pipeline coverage deficits in one area of the business versus the other. Like, so when you segment your pipeline, you can see that in this is a business that I was working with previously who had global customer base, very strong in Europe, but not so strong in North America. So when we looked holistically at it, the pipeline coverage was 2.4x, which it really needed about 4x to meet its revenue targets. And how we did that, it's very simple math. You're looking at sort of the bookings target, and you're working backwards. So, what pipeline did we really need to reach those targets? We looked at the win rate, historical win rate by segment, different sort of product lines as well. And then we looked at stage conversion as well. And each of the different product lines and segments had different conversion rates, but then we sort of looked at it holistically. And how long was the sales cycle, and what was the mix of new logo versus expansion. And so when we did all of that, there was a significant revenue gap. To get to that revenue target, we needed at least 4x pipeline, and we were just hovering at like 2.4x. So it was a long way to go. We had to figure out, how do we make up for that gap.
That sequence is really at the heart of executive trust. Trust being a word we talk about a lot. What I've heard is bookings target, required pipeline, conversion assumptions, operating gaps, investment priorities, and then the assumptions have to be visible, right? Exploring what's the average deal size, win rate, stage conversion, sales cycle length, new logo versus expansion mix, as you said, and the retention risk, of course. That's very different from showing a campaign dashboard and asking leadership to infer the revenue story. So now you also bring an important counterweight to the acquisition conversation, Annika. What changes when the executive story includes expansion, retention, revenue protection, and revenue at risk, not only new logo pipeline?
Yeah, I experienced this at each open where, again, we had those 9 business units, but we also had grown by acquisitions. One of the companies that we acquired was Intra. They were a large global logistics network, and their primary goal was to retain these large contracts with the logistics providers so that the shippers would continue to come onto the network and transact. And in order to do that, marketing was responsible for coming up with a customer loyalty initiative that would entice those shippers to come back and do more transactions on the network. So it was all about helping to protect those very significant, and it was 8-figure ARR that we had from those large logistics providers. Um, and so that was a different sort of metric, different motion, different way that we had to drive that retention, or to retain those big accounts was a different motion that we were doing than trying to acquire new customers or expand existing customers. It was to retain those large accounts. So that's really is, I think, also just as important to show that on a dashboard. That's important to the business, just as important as new source pipeline. And so I think that was an interesting use case for how we monitored that metric. And I think executives need to see the full picture. Like you said, they need to see the full picture of acquisition, retention, expansion, revenue protection, and what revenue is at risk. So again, it comes back to that, what we were talking about before with the executive suite, what they are looking to track versus what the functional leaders are tracking.
So yeah, a complete growth story shows what the business is creating, expanding, and protecting. Now I want to put a simple 5-part spine around everything that we've just covered. Number 1, target. Let's think about what revenue outcome are we accountable to? Number 2, the gap, where our coverage, conversion, or retention assumptions off plan. Number 3, movement, our favorite. What leading evidence is showing that the engine is improving or declining? Number 4, the outcome factor. So what pipeline, revenue, expansion, or protection for the install base is actually being produced? And number 5, decision. What must leadership change, fund, or stop or sequence next? A trusted executive story doesn't try to win an attribution argument. Instead, it makes the revenue gap, the movement, and the next decision visible. That's what I think a important revenue story tells. And that is the bridge that takes us from reporting to predictability. So yeah, revenue predictability is something that we talk about a lot.
When a team recognizes this problem, that they have to kind of reset their predictability and what they're looking at in the data, how do they keep the reset from becoming another dashboard project and not, really understand getting those defined metrics, settle on that with the entire go-to-market team? How do you get to that? How
Yeah,
does that work?
love this question. Been spending the last months with a lot of go-to-market leaders and practitioners who resonate with this thought. First of all, I start by refusing to start with the dashboard. Instead, I pivoted to a 5-part reset. I would say start with executive decisions, right? Like you keep saying, work it backwards. Write down the decisions the CEO, the CRO, CFO, and the board have to make from the revenue story. And that's much more interesting lens. And then second, unlock the math and the definitions. So, working as a holistic go-to-market team with the sales leaders, the SDR leaders, I would agree on the targets, the pipeline needed. We're talking about what's the pipeline multiple? Have clear definitions, shared definitions on stages, contribution, progression, expansion, retention, and risk. And then third, I think a lot of companies struggle with this one as well. Clarify the shared ownership, right? Define exactly what it is that marketing, sales, RevOps, finance partners, and AI agents, what each owns in creating and moving the revenue. And number 4, definitely, this is the conversation I've been having with other go-to-market leaders and practitioners as of late. It's centered around rebuilding the KPI stack, right? So keep the metrics really that support a decision and remove the ones that basically, what I would say, decorate the dashboard. And we'll talk about those metrics in a second, that KPI stack. And number 5, I would create an operating cadence. So go from like siloed, busy activity to more of a go-to-market motion that has an operating cadence to it. And review leading movement frequently, economics monthly, and assumptions during every planning cycle. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's my thoughts. I'm happy to share. I'd love to hear your thoughts to that, but
No, I think that that's something that every business is struggling with. So I love that framework. It's because it starts with executive decisions, not with just the available data that we can capture from our CRM and our different marketing systems and sales systems, or just, when we get a dashboard, we're trying to figure out, why do I need to look at this data? What is it doing for me? Versus starting not with a dashboard, but starting with the executive questions that they're asking, and then coming up with the data that you need versus the other way around. Saves a lot of time and effort. So yeah, I mean, what decision will this metric support is a good question. Who owns the metric? How do we define the metric, and what action will we take when that metric changes? We have to keep track of, who's accountable for what. I think is really important when we look at these metrics. But again, to your point, it just shouldn't start with the dashboard.
if it does, I think this rebuild of a dashboard, or call it a 4-layer KPI stack, is something that is very interesting because everybody knows what kind of, not activity, but what kind of movement is happening, what the priorities are. and everybody has that transparency of who's doing what and how we are collectively rowing in the boat together to move revenue forward. And so, without further ado,
Yeah.
let me just get to it. Those 4 layers are coverage, readiness, throughput, and yield. Those are those 4 key areas. And let me break down what each layer answers, because each layer is answering a different executive question. So coverage asks, do we have enough of the right market? ICP, buying group coverage, and the qualified pipeline surface to hit the plan. And we look at the ICP and the account target coverage. We look at the buying group coverage. We look at pipeline coverage by segment, white space, and retention or expansion coverage, as we talked about before. I'd say one important guardrail here is that we're talking about pre-opportunity stages and then deal stage or opportunity stages. So it's either pre-opportunity, where marketing usually plays, and then opportunity stages where sales has the ball. So coverage is basically foundational. All right, so then the next layer, the second layer, is readiness. Readiness is asking, are the right accounts becoming ready for coordinated action? So that's the marketing and SDR team. We're looking at credible signals, engagement by buying group members, and especially target account progression. We're talking about that 40, we increased account progression in the targeted ICP by 40% in that year. I think that is above benchmark. I think to move like 20 to 30% of accounts forward in a year, depending on how long the buying signal is. I know for us, it was 6, 8 months, sometimes up to a year. I digress, but yeah, it's that target account progression is my point, looking at that. And then the fit, the target account fit plus the intent with that, and then the readiness by segment. Okay, so activity alone is not readiness. I just want to make that clear. And this, lead versus account plays a big role here. Definitely we're focused on account readiness here. And so that's a meaningful state change. The next one is throughput. So what does throughput ask? Well, it asks, can the revenue engine, the go-to-market motion team engine, convert readiness into meetings? Can they convert them into opportunities? Is there stage movement that's continuing? So are things basically progressing? And how many meetings are being set and how many of those meetings are actually moving forward? So we're looking at signal to action time. We're looking at the meeting conversions, as I mentioned. We're looking at opportunity creation, stage conversion, handoff timing, and velocity. And volume alone is not throughput. This is where conversion and speed really matter. All right, so that's throughput. The fourth layer is yield. This is at the executive level, the board level. This is the favorite metric. The yield asks what commercial value is the motion producing or protecting, and it looks at wins, bookings, or ARR, expansion, retention, revenue protected, win rate, of course, and as we talked about, the return on marketing investment and the cost to revenue efficiency. So on this yield layer, it has to include new logo, expansion, and revenue protection, the install base. All right, so I know that was a mouthful, but that was basically the 4 KPI layer. And Annika, when you look at typical marketing dashboards, which layer do these dashboards that you typically see over index on, and what do you think which layer is usually missing in our marketing dashboards?
Yeah, I mean, most of the time, as we talked earlier about, most marketing leaders will over-index on activity and engagement. So how much volume of net new leads, MQLs, and it doesn't really prove that an account has meaningfully changed the state or the buying stage is where they are, like you said earlier, the buying stage versus the opportunity stage. Um, so really, like you said, the missing layer is readiness, right? Are those accounts and buying groups, are they becoming more prepared for coordinated sales and marketing action? are they ready to talk to us as a vendor that they might be considering? And again, we only can determine that through the right intent signals that we would track. And then we would be able to prioritize that outbound sequence based on that readiness signal. And that's critical to finding those red accounts that would turn into opportunities, but also saving our time, saving the budget, and not waste any of our time and effort and budget on accounts that are not ready to buy. So that's critical. So I love that
Yeah,
readiness.
which brings me to the next question. So, again, pre opportunity stage, thinking about movement of accounts, right? Top of funnel, middle of funnel. A lot of times we coin these as the awareness, consideration, evaluation, or also known as decision, and the pre purchase stage, right? That's right
Yeah.
before the handoff to an SDR. So, with this account progression dynamic that we're talking about, where do you think, or where did account progression, in your view, give leadership an earlier signal than actual pipeline creation? Because let's be honest, in ABM, everything that's before pipeline creation and opportunity gets made, it's a bit nebulous, right?
It takes into account, as we know, both first party and third party signals. So looking at if those accounts are engaging with our campaigns, our website, or we can track if those accounts are outside of our domain and searching on keywords relative to our business and to our products. The combination of those two and second party as well. So all of that data in aggregate is important. And it's also an indicator. It's not foolproof. It's definitely something that we have to take in with a grain of salt, but it's also something we wouldn't have 10 years, 20 years ago. So having that data is only going to make us stronger and more targeting to what we should be focusing on those right accounts. So I think the account progression is a really important metric to track for marketers and for the sales leaders as well. So showing that movement from one buying stage to another is going to then also, signal that there's more likely commercial movement happening and that there could be an opportunity being created in the near future. So I think it's a good indicator of the opportunity creation. We should always be looking at that and making sure that we're watching that progression very closely.
Yeah, I want to emphasize that distinction that you're making, the difference between engagement and movement.
Yeah.
So, engagement says somebody did something, but movement says the account changed state in a way that should affect coordinated action. All right, before we close, I've got 3 rapid fire field notes. Annika, what's the one metric you'd remove from the executive deck tomorrow?
Hands down, it would have to be raw lead volume without the quality, the conversion, or the revenue context. That should be removed tomorrow, no problem.
Fully agree. All right, rapid fire question number 2. What's the one question marketing should ask finance before the next board meeting?
Hmm, good question. I would say which assumptions in our revenue plan carry the greatest risk and what evidence would increase your confidence in them?
Good. All right, rapid fire question number 3. What's one shared review or operating habit sales, marketing, and RevOps could start with this week?
I think a shared weekly review of qualified coverage, account progression, stage movement, velocity, and specific interventions that were needed. That type of weekly cadence of reviews will really get everything moving quickly.
Love it. All right, those 3 answers give a team a starting point that you could springboard off of tomorrow. Remove a metric that creates noise, ask finance a question that exposes an assumption, and install one shared review that keeps movement visible. All right, let's bring this whole episode home, shall we? Influence is evidence, not the whole revenue story. Now that you know how to separate attribution detail from executive decision confidence, you can take this back into your business and use AI as your thought partner. Annika and I put a prompt together, and you can give your AI tool your current marketing revenue deck, KPI definitions, and recent performance data, and then just Ask it to identify ambiguous definitions, unsupported assumptions, false precision, missing links between activity, account movement, pipeline, and revenue, and the decisions your reporting doesn't yet enable. Then ask it to rebuild the measurement stack around coverage, readiness, throughput, and yield. We'll provide the inputs so you can develop a little micro knowledge base for your AI. Now, the full copy and paste prompt we're going to put here in the show notes, and we'll pin it to the comments. And if you want to see where confidence is breaking across your own revenue engine, take the Revenue Engine Confidence Index Assessment. It'll take you a few minutes. It's free. You can visit it at gtmconfidence.com. Once you spend a few minutes and ask some questions, you'll get a Revenue Engine Confidence snapshot across predictability, signal trust, alignment, and modernization. Plus, you'll get a more clear view of the constraint to address first. All right. So, Annika, this was fun. Thank you so much for comparing field notes today. And
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun. I love talking about these topics, and as things are evolving, what we can do to get more efficient, more effective in our models and our frameworks, and how we're measuring GTM. It's just fun. It's great. It's really exciting.
it
So
is. I love bringing this real operator detail to a conversation that
yeah,
can otherwise become pretty abstract. And
absolutely.
so thank you so much for adding so much value. And everyone watching or listening, thank you so much for joining. Remember, the goal isn't more attribution detail. It's a revenue story leadership can use to make the next best decision. This is RevAI Real Talk, Real GTM, Smarter Revenue, and we'll see you in the next one.